Hi guys, this is Sin. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a very simple Hello World type application using Visual Studio 2010 and WPF. So let's get started. We'll name our app Hello World. One thing you'll notice right away is that there's the canvas on the top and the XAML code on the bottom. Now, if you were to create a very simple business application that only collects, say, the the user's first name and last name, you can drag and drop your controls like the way you've been able to do it in WinForms. Align them and maybe put a button on the bottom. And if you run this, you can see it's much in the same way that you've created WinForms applications in the past. That's not really the way I would create and lay out my controls using WPF. In WPF, this is the grid canvas, so you can specify rows and columns. You can drag your label to whatever cell you want it to be, right? And even then, this is still not the way I would create an application in WPF. If you run this, notice it runs. Doesn't quite have the behavior you want, right? So now, let's really do it like the way a professional developer would do it in WPF. Let me delete everything that I put on the grid there. So now we have a blank grid. And we'll type everything in code so we don't need a toolbox. The first thing I'm going to specify is a grid row definition. And we want to specify 2 rows. We'll specify the first height to be of, say, 40. And the second row would be of height everything else. That's what the asterisk means. I also want to specify column definitions. I want to specify 4 columns. We'll set the first width to be 100. The second width, it will be an asterisk. The third width to be 100, and the fourth width will be an asterisk as well. I'm going to go ahead and remove the hard-coded width and height for the window, and you'll see in a second why. We'll specify a minimum width and height. Minimum width equals 400. Minimum height equals 400. Okay. Now let's start putting in some labels and controls. Our first label will say first name. Notice it's vertically aligned, so I'm going to tell it to be centered to the cell. It's also left aligned, so I want to tell it to be right aligned to the cell. Maybe we'll put a colon right there. We also need to tell the label where it should be in the grid. It will be in grid row 0 and grid column 1. Well, 0 for the first cell there. Now let's put a text box in there. Same thing, we'll tell the grid where the text box should be. It'll be grid row 0 and grid column of 1. Now the text box is there, but it's taking up the entire cell's dimension. So we want to tell it to be vertically aligned, to be centered. Right? We'll give this text box a name. The easiest way to do that is to just go to the text box property here and give it a name, txt first name. And all it did was add the name attribute. So I'm going to copy these 2 controls, the label and the text box, paste them in. All I'm going to do is change the column, the grid column here to 2 and 3. So you can see they just showed up right there. Change the first name to be last name. Also change the controls, the text box name to be last name. So far so good. Now I don't like how this text box is at the very edge of the window. Let me run that and show you. See how this text box is flush to the right side? A few ways you can fix that, but the easiest way I do it is to just specify a margin. Just so I can demonstrate to you what the margin does. The margin accepts 4 values, the first one being the left margin, the top margin, the right margin, which I'll specify to be 10 pixels, and the bottom margin. So notice how if I run this by hitting F5, the text box now has a 10 pixel margin to the right, so it's not flush to the screen, to the window. Let's go ahead and add a button. We'll give it a caption of say hello. We'll tell the button to be in grid row number 1 and grid column 0. The button is there, you just can't see it because it's taking up the entire width and height of that cell. What I really want is for the button to be centered to the form, so I'll tell it to be grid column span of 4. Let's give it a vertical alignment of top. See, now it's looking more and more of a like a normal button, and a horizontal alignment of center. We'll give it a minimum width of 100 pixels. Let's run this just so you can see how it looks like. So there's our form. You can see how you can maximize it. It takes up the entire width of the screen. The text box stretches as you would expect, and the hello button remains centered. It does have a minimum width and height, so it won't shrink beyond what we specified as the minimum. Now let's attach some code. Double click the say hello button. We'll throw in a message box. Hello, and whatever the username first name. Give it a space there, and whatever last name that the user typed in. And we'll put in an exclamation mark at the end. Let's go back to XAML, hit F5. Let me shrink this form a little bit and type in my first name to be Lori Sinshoko, and click the say hello button. And there you have it, your very first WPF Hello World application.